Welcome along, one and all, to round 8 of season 8 of the APPF1 F2 Cup. We are here, as you can see, between the two famous lakes just outside of Sao Paulo in Brazil. We are at Interlagos for the Brazilian round of the championship. Round 8, as I said already, on a night where we could very well see a champion crowned, but we're going to have to keep an eye out on that throughout proceedings. Of course, unfortunately, out of the four mathematical championship contenders, two of them are not present tonight. The third and fourth place drivers, Ghost and Who Am I, meaning that the two drivers that we're really looking out for in that particular battle is the runaway championship leader Fortuna and his nearest rival QVR Verstappen. Fortuna 45 points ahead going into this round with 66 left on the table after these two races here tonight. We'll keep a very close eye on that. But of course, we do have a large grid of drivers ready to take on the action here tonight. It is worth noting, of course, that well, we are starting a little bit late. We were trying to get Copemaster into the lobby, but unfortunately the invite's not quite agreeing with his internet. So we do start a driver down, but hopefully this is still going to be a great night of action, as you would expect it to be here at this famous track. So we're just counting down towards the one-shot qualifying session, and of course regular viewers will know exactly how this one will go. We will have our session. The top 10 will be reversed for the first race of the evening, and then of course we'll take the actual qualifying order to the second race of the evening, that being of course the feature race. But we're going to get into things just off. The game's put me on with Reshka, and I don't believe I've had a quality lap on board with him, so keep an eye on the Van Amersfoort driver. Of course, his teammate not here tonight, so he'll have to try and make do with that, heading out of the iconic Senna. As I say iconic, virtually this entire track is iconic. DRS now open for the first event, heading towards the end of the first sector, and a 19.4 for Reshka in the upper midfield at the moment. The high tech's up there, as you would expect, as he heads through the fourth corner of the Serra do Lago up towards this incredibly technical middle section of the track. Ferradura first, then just flicking that car in fourth gear, holding it together, then on the brakes into S8 turn 8. You can see a little bit of locking, trying to keep that car in line. Breshka manages that very nicely, short shifting a little bit into third gear, tricky traction zone out of Pinarino, braking now into Vico Di Pato, very tight, slow corner, second gear. Again, the rear end threatens to step away from him, manages to gather it up, and now to the final significant corner on the track at Junshao. Exit imperative here. Reshka actually carrying a bit too much entry speed, having to wait to get onto that loud pedal eventually, but now is on his way. But it does look like the championship leader is in command here, chased home by his teammate. We're going to see them come over the line now. It is Fortuna to take it by about the sum of a quarter of a second ahead of his teammate and fellow Swede Jordan DHL, and of course High Tech with a relatively comfortable lead in the constructors and looking to stamp their authority on that even further. We'll of course run through the results in just a short second, but yeah, of course, no points for the pole position, but certainly very, very crucial stuff for Fortuna. He takes it ahead of Jordan DHL and Kylo Ren, of course, the long-standing top-tier driver in this league, especially Tier 1 multiple champion, making his appearance for this season. I believe the first time we've seen him, he is third, just ahead of QVR Verstappen, the championship contender. Behind that is James and Reshka. Hugo down in 7th, just ahead of Jackalacco, Runes and JB. Rounding out the top 10, and JB will get that pole position for the sprint race. He's just ahead of Coro, then Bacon Bear, then Robsu, then Lawrence, who did not have a clean run at all through his lap, I think it's fair to say. So we will jump straight ahead into the first race of the evening with JB leading them away. The Framer driver, he is going to be alongside Runes on that front row. So we'll build towards that in just a short second. Medium tyres, I imagine it's going to be for the entire field, and we'll see how it's going to go. I believe it's 14 laps of this circuit that we're going to have for the sprint race, so plenty of time certainly for some of the drivers to move up. We've seen, of course, well, Fortuna starting down in 10th place, but the way that man can get off the line, you do wonder where he's going to end up within the first couple of laps. QVR Verstappen, though, does have him by 3 places on the grid, at least going into this race. And of course, he's trying to avoid being outscored. Well, ideally, he wants to outscore the championship leader by a substantial margin to give him a real fighting chance going into the last 2 rounds, but certainly cannot be outscored by a margin any greater than 19 points. Otherwise, that will mathematically wrap up the championship for Fortuna. So again, calculations are going to have to be run throughout tonight, but that is the tale of the tape as it stands with our 2 championship contenders. We'll wait just a little longer though to get this race underway, and we will have our sprint race to kick off the evening, hopefully in just a minute's time or so. And so here we go now, lining up for the 8th sprint race of the season. And the sprint race here at Interlagos is go, with JB leading them away off the lane. Runes trying to get to him, can't quite match the Prema's speed off the lane. So JB sweeps into the lead from Runes. Hugo and Jacolaco going side by side. And the 2 Campos, Runes lunges to the inside of JB, and that's end plate damage once again for the Australian. He goes side by side, but Hugo's going to have a double slipstream on the pair of them, and they go 3 abreast at the very front of the race towards the City del Lago. There's more end plates flying in the background. Sweeping around the outside is Runes. He is not going to care one jot about that wing damage. He does run wide, but JB balked further behind, and he's side by side with Jacolaco for that 3rd place on the podium. Runes immediately cedes to his teammate, and he's going to try and be a rear gunner, and Hugo has that opportunity to drive up the road. So huge plays here for the first Campos. It was critical for Runes to get that done on JB, and that's afforded him that opportunity to hold this pack up. Hugo disappearing up the road, fighting further down the field they are. Good start for Kylo Ren, managing to squeeze out QVR Verstappen, and the 2 high-techs are side by side just behind them. No big movements on this occasion from Fortuna off the lane. His teammate does have a look at QVR Verstappen and manages to draw level with the ART car as they run side by side. On the run down towards the lane, slipstream of the car in front is going to be imperative for both as they still run completely level. Up in front, still close battling. JB's on the defensive once again. James, of course, has been in tremendous form of late, is trying to sweep around the outside. He's not given much space by the Prema, and he's going to get squeezed out. Reshka to follow through, does make a bit of contact, bit of wheel banging, but Reshka does go through, and James Balk there has Kylo Ren for company. Kylo Ren's got to cover off Jordan though, who's looking left and right to make his own challenges then. They're still fighting hard in this midfield battle, and there was a lunge, I think, from Fortuna on QVR Verstappen. Championship contenders going at it, and Fortuna tags the back of his teammate, I think, and losing the rear end, and set back in this race. He doesn't have any major damage. He very aggressively squeezes Robsu to the inside of Ferradura. But a bit of a moment there for Fortuna, and he's got to try and work his way back into contention in this race after that little incident. Maybe a little bit of a break for QVR Verstappen. He hasn't had the best start to this race, but can he make good of it? There hasn't been much movements, I have to say, from most of the provisional top runners, at the very least, from that qualifying session. Still balked in that, well, the top 4 still from qualifying, running in those P7 downward spots. Fortuna was having a go at Lawrence, couldn't quite manage it on that occasion. Is further ahead now. Kylo Ren is trying to make some progress against it. We've seen him making a very good start. He's tucked into the slipstream with James. James sitting in the middle of the road. Reshka on JB further ahead. The Prema runs wide, as does Kylo. He's gone very deep. Cuts over the inside of turn 2, but the ART goes wide out of that same corner, and they're still level on the exit with Jordan, making it 3 abreast. And side by side, the 3 of them go. Kylo with a nose ahead. Jordan boxed onto the inside, is going to break late and stay in it. Kylo a little bit deep. James gets pinched between him and caught behind his QVR Verstappen, and into the wall! Into the wall for the championship contender. He brings it back into line. Lawrence is off the road further ahead of him, but QVR Verstappen just getting caught up in an incident that did not involve him in any way. But that is bitter bad luck, and any kind of points, of course, only points for the top 12 in the sprint race, and he's got to rely on misfortune from the drivers in front. So Fortuna now gaining a bit of ascendancy in that personal battle, but certainly not the start to the race that either of those guys was looking for. Still running up at the front, Hugo leads and leads comfortably. Runes, to his credit, is very much able to stay with him. Maybe Hugo, well, I was going to say he's maybe trying to keep his teammate in DRS range if he could, although if he could scamper up the road, I dare say he would. Fortuna does slipstream through on Robsu. Robsu, of course, looking to counter down towards the first corner, but Fortuna just parks the car in the middle of the road, runs very, very deep though, and runs completely off the road, recovers that car. JB was off the road further ahead, and Robsu just goes straight through. Nothing really much resistance offered by the high-tech driver, so Robsu up into 10th position, has JB now to chase up in front of him. Robsu, the Finn, of course, sitting outside the top 20 in the standings, will be trying to move up the order and score some good points tonight, is doing just that at the moment, just running ahead of the championship leader. No real movers and shakers at the moment. I didn't have the track map up. I did see yellow flags out there. Not sure. Doesn't seem as though anyone's had any major offs. QVR Verstappen has come into the pits, puts another set of the medium tyres on, but well, with I imagine not very much opportunity to claw his way back in here, unfortunately, for him. Hugo leads, Runs leads, Jacko leads Reshka. Reshka absorbing pressure here from Jordan DHL. We saw him come out best out of that incident involving, well, it was involving him, Kylo and James. And QVR Verstappen was really the driver that lost out. Jordan to the outside is going to easily breeze past Reshka, and there's not very much that the Van Amersfoort driver can do about that one. Jordan through into P4. Fortuna trying to get Robsu, for goodness sake. Robsu with a very, very late lunge. Gets a level but big contact. Fortuna hangs on around the outside. He will pick up that slipstream, of course, with the DRS. Is he going to try and challenge? He's certainly shown he's not shy about throwing a move up the inside as they head towards the Cida del Lago, but on this occasion, Fortuna able to cover him off, and cover him off well. If he can fend him off into Ferradura, that should give him the opportunity to get into a rhythm and just try and scamper up the road. It hasn't been the evening he wanted, and just to confirm, he does also have wing damage on that high-tech, and is just trying to make the best of it. But as we saw in the previous lap, struggling to get that car slowed down and struggling for out-and-out speed. It looks as though a big haul of points is not going to come his way with so many drivers running so well further up the road. Hugo still leads Runes. Runes just about hanging on to that DRS range, and that did genuinely look like Hugo backed off the throttle there. Is he trying to protect his teammate's second place? That little left, that very obvious left that you saw on the exit of Jun Chao suggests that he is. So he's trying to create a bit of a Campos buffer here, and Jackalacco finding himself frustrated in that third place without much opportunity to attack Runes. We'll see what he does here, as he's only a few car lengths back, but yeah, Hugo, that definitely a confirmation. He is trying to carry his teammate through and bring home a 1-2 for the Campos cars. Of course, such a strong team, haven't really had the consistency throughout this season to challenge, at least up at the sharp end of the Constructors' battle, but they've certainly shown their abilities on multiple occasions throughout this season, and of course running in this one too. Jackalacco trying to work his own way back, and Jordan DHL is hunting these guys down at the moment though. Of course, past Reshka not so long ago, and he's worked his way towards that DRS range of the leading trio, so he is going to go in the offensive. Jordan never shy about an overtaking manoeuvre, looking of course to bring this one home from a P9 start on the grid. Would be very impressive if he could pull it off. He's going to have hard work to do though against these three, and I imagine as soon as Runes is passed by either Jackalacco or Jordan, should that happen, then he is going to try and scamper up the road as soon as he can. But Jordan is homing into view of Jackalacco. He's got tremendous straight line speed in that high-tech. Fastest lap of the race is evidence of that. Darts to the inside, going into the centre S, gets that car stopped nicely. Jackalacco trying to carry momentum around the outside, manages to get his way through, and he actually forced Jordan to turn out of that second corner, and that's where you see the high-tech losing a lot of that momentum. Reshka and Kylo Ren have been drawn into this battle too. Jackalacco's defence of that third place has made his task of getting DRS off the top two that little bit tougher, but of course the damage shod Campos of Runes has that downforce disadvantage, and Jackalacco with clean air can try and work his way back in, which it appears as though he is able to do. penalties being picked up further down the field. Robso, Bacon Bear and Lawrence all with such fortunes. Top 6 very tight for the race lead. Kylo Ren with a good run on Reshka. Reshka covers that inside line into Biko DePato, and there's nowhere for the multiple tier 1 champion to go on this occasion. It is great to see Kylo back in action, but can he work his way past Reshka and by extension the rest of this leading train? It's very, very competitive up at the front of this field, but of course that second place of Runes being preserved by his teammate Yuhom Hug, and it has to say also some very smart defensive driving from the Australian. But Jordan's got another run on the Scot of Jackalacko, and they're going to go side by side. This time he's much further alongside, and Jacko's going to find it much harder to sweep around the outside of the first couple of corners. On this occasion he cannot. Jordan to P3 continues his momentous charge in this sprint race. Can he see it through up at the very front of this race? He's got just under 7 laps to do it against those 2 Campos cars, and you'd imagine that Runes is going to have a much tougher task keeping Jordan behind than he was able to do against Jackalacko. And still Reshka hounded very, very strongly by Kylo Ren. Can the Rodent find his own way through for that 5th position? We saw he was close on the previous lap. Jordan as well getting ever closer to Runes, already looking to threaten up at the front. Kylo, does he fancy a late lunge going into Biko DePato? Looks like Reshka has that one covered. JB battling with Fortuna. Fortuna trying to pick off as many points as he can. Goes side by side with JB, squeezes him towards the outside. It's just about clean. They're still going to go side by side. Bit of contact on the entry to Mergulio, but Fortuna does eventually manage to get that move done. Here comes Jordan DHL looking for 2nd place. Runes forced onto the defensive, goes to the middle of the road. Which side of the road does Jordan elect for? He's going to go for the outside line and try and brake late. Runes, though, to his credit, very, very strong on the brakes and manages to effectively get that car stopped and turned in. A penalty for Jackalacko. It's going to set back his chances with 2 cars all over him for that 4th place. Still Jordan pursues Runes up towards Desira de Lago. Doesn't quite have the straight line speed edge though, feigning to the inside. He does manage to draw a response from Runes. Understeering wide as the Campos. Jordan tries to find a way through into turn 5, but the door is firmly shut, and you have to say fairly so. And Runes doing a stellar job of holding on to that 2nd place, but Jordan is ever threatening in that 3rd place. We have a spinner further up the road. It's Lawrence, and more misery continues on this game for Lawrence D1989. He does have the soft tyres on and may look for a late bid for the fastest lap, but certainly no real chance of a top result in this race. Watch the gap for the top 2. Watch Hugo make sure his teammate is within that DRS range to try and defend from Jordan DHL. There it is over the line. See, just a second it ticks onto, and Rune's able to just to draw that little bit closer on the exit. Jordan with a slipstream now for 2nd place on the road. Can he find his own way through? He's a little bit further back on this occasion, but again he is comfortable lunging from distance going into turn 1. Runes again is confident on the brakes in spite of that damage. He's getting that car stopped very, very well. Kylo Ren trying to set up Reshka on the exit of the Senna S through Curva de Sol. He's right there with him, but look at Jordan. Jordan again threatening, going down towards the Cita de Lago. Runes, can he fend him off on this occasion? Lap 10 of the race, and Jordan looking for 2nd place. Again, he's right there with Runes. Runes not baiting on the feint to the inside this time around, and keeps that 2nd position a bit more safely this time around. Still the slipstream in action for Jordan DHL. He's right with him. Surely not into Essa from distance. Let's see, going into turn number 8. He does again have a think about it. Runes again, I think, did respond under the brakes, made sure to roll plenty of entry speed going into the corner, and it was good to hold on to that 2nd place. Into Biko DePato, another feint from Jordan DHL. He's trying to crack the armour of the 2nd place man in this race. Runes again just outside that DRS, and Hugo allowing him to draw that little bit closer. Lap 10 of the race. He is going to have to back off on this occasion, on the exit there. You can see he does so to make sure that Runes has that DRS, with splendid teamwork, it has to be said, between these two up at the front of this race. Can they sustain it? Kylo is right there with Reshka, as he's been for the last couple of laps, but still threatening as they head towards turn 1. He feints to the inside. Reshka puts his car in exactly the right place to cover him off. Overtakes proving to be hard to come by in this leading train at the moment, but still 6 cars running in so close proximity up at the front. with just under 4 laps to go. Penalties being picked up at the lower end of the points. JB with a 3-second penalty to his name now, as look at Jordan again towards Ferradura, and Runes now covering the inside hard, going into turn 6 on this occasion. Can Jordan find a way through? The rear end actually betraying him there into turn 6. Reshka now trying to find his way through against Jakalako, of course. Jacko with the penalty does mean he's not much competition for Reshka, but Reshka has got Kylo Ren to contend with and would ideally want a car in between himself and the pursuing Rodin. So, still, it's firmly poised up at the front, and still no changes of position. Another feint from Jordan. Runes again not biting. Out of Jun Shao they go. Look at Jordan all over the road. Making sure, and Runes, I think he might have been outside of that range this time. He was. Runes does not have DRS. Hugo's trying to back off, but it's too late. Is this the opportunity now that Jordan DHL has been looking for? Here he is in the slipstream. Here he is to the outside to finally snatch second place. Runes tries to come back. Does tap the back of the high-tech, but Jordan is through into second place, gets the run out of the Senna S, and I don't think that Runes is going to have much opportunity to counter. So Jordan to P2, and in doing so, in backing off, Hugo's now got pressure from behind. Reshka now on Jakalako, breaks very, very late into the Cida del Lago. They go side by side now through onto the exit. Reshka's squeezed onto the outside curb, and again Obi squeezed towards Ferradura, but he still managed to preserve that inside line. Jakalako barreling in entry speed to go side by side with the Van Amersfoort, carrying plenty of speed in that Trident. Reshka now with a lunge, going into Essa, and they're still side by side now, heading into Pinarino. Now to the exit, Jacalaco's going to try and squeeze his rival out. Can't quite manage to do so, does Reshka now. He's got the upper hand surely into Bico Tabato, but Jacalaco so good on the brakes and manages to fend off. Brilliant defensive driving from Jacalaco and great racing between the pair of them, but he's exposed himself now because he does not have DRS to defend from the two drivers pursuing him. So hard work ahead here for Jacalaco, and the battling is also bringing James towards his penalty window. Plenty of battles to observe with 2 laps to go. Jordan DHL looking for the lead on Hugo. Hugo breaks very, very late, runs it in deep, and Jordan's just going to switch it back. There's nothing Hugo could do. He's barged by his teammate in the other end plate, gone for Runes. And in the end, the Campos drivers, after a brilliant display throughout this entire race, they've come together at a crucial point, and Runes' defence is going to become even harder. Wasn't able to cover it on stream, but Jacalaco was swarmed predictably on that main straight. Reshka and Kylo Ren do both go through. You imagine now that Hugo, pursuit of Jordan DHL for the race win seems to be almost a futile endeavour. Is he going to try now and switch tack to hold on to the 2-3 for Campos? But again, Runes' task has become much tougher with that contact with his teammate. And Reshka, Kylo Ren will be chomping at the bit, looking for any which way through they can find. So Jordan from 9th place on the grid. It really has been a spectacular drive through for the Swede, of course, where his teammate has ran into trouble in this race. The other high-tech has picked up the pieces and looks set for a stunning win. And of course, from 2nd on the grid, will have a great chance in the feature race to come. Reshka now to the outside. Runes, well, Hugo seems to be preserving his 2nd place. Kylo Ren, though, looking to try and spring a surprise. He's managed to get level with Reshka as they both go around Runes. Kylo looking for it in the rear end, gets away from Reshka. Maybe he was tagged by one of the cars behind him, I'm not sure, but Kylo Ren is up in a 3rd place, and what a drive it's been, what a persistent drive it's been to get up into P3 on the road. Reshka bulked into 4th place. He did manage to stay ahead of Jacalaco. Runes still right there with him. James has gone into the party as Runes very, very deep through the Cida del Lago. He rejoins the track now with James right there with him and picking up that slipstream, but he doesn't seem to have any surefire way of getting the move done. Runes, though, with major damage on that Campos. Looks to be almost easy pickings as James to the inside lunges late. They do make a bit of contact, and still going into Pinarino. Runes fiercely fighting on for that 6th place. He's got the penalty delta on Jacalaco to try and preserve as well, so he could try and get a top 5 despite all the damage. But look at this drive. Jordan DHL DHL. What a splendid work of your way through the field it has been from Jordan DHL, seeing his way through against the very best of the F2 Cup. He did benefit from other drivers' damage, but nevertheless, Jordan DHL, one of the drives of the season to take the sprint race win. Hugo comes home in second place for Kylo Ren, Reshka fourth. Jack Alako's penalty will concede the place to Runes and to James. Runes just managing to fend off James over the line. Jack Alako, a frustrating seventh place for him. Fortuna does come through. NP8 from Koru, then JB rounds out the top 10 points. Paying possessions will be sealed by Robsu and Bacon Bear. And I do want to quickly check. No, I've just remembered we don't have any fastest lap point for this race, so we just have to look at the eventual point standings from this race. No points for QVR Verstappen, crucially, but it's not a huge scalp though in that championship battle by Fortuna either, as QVR Verstappen does see out this race. Fortuna for 8th place has, I believe, 5 points, so he stretches the championship lead to 50 ahead of the feature race. It's still possible for him to wrap it up, but it would require an unmitigated disaster for QVR Verstappen for that to be the case. Still, what a race that was, and again, what a drive from Jordan DHL. Absolutely brilliant stuff. I feel like his uncompromising attitude towards racing has sometimes worked against him throughout this season, but on this occasion, well, he was magnificent. What a drive it was, working his way all the way through the field. We'll, of course, tidy up the results after that race ahead of the feature race to come. Again, Fortuna, 50 points clear going into that race, but he will need another follow-up disaster from QVR Verstappen. Here we go. It is the win for Jordan DHL from Joachim Hug in second place and Kylo Ren in third. Reshka came next in fourth position, and Runes in fifth. What could have been without the damage? James comes next in sixth position, continuing his good run of form. Jack Alako in seventh. Fortuna in eighth, having to cope with damage throughout the race, and Koru and JB coming next. Robsu and Bacon Bear picking up the final points. Sorry. And then it's QVR Verstappen, Lawrence not seeing out the checkered flag. So that will bring an end to the first race of the evening, and we'll of course get that second race underway very, very shortly. So we will look forward to it. Now we have the strategy element diving into the race. 20 laps it'll be, I believe, this one ahead of us. So it's going to be a bit of a test of endurance for the drivers in front of them. Can't wait to get into this, though. Into Lagos has already produced one great race tonight, and hopefully they've got room for another. Just a reminder, of course, it is the high-techs who do take the first two positions on the grid in Fortuna and Jordan DHL. Then comes Kylo Ren and QVR Verstappen. That third row is made up of NMX James and Reshka. Fourth row is Hugo and Jack Alako. And the top 10 rounded out by Runes and the sprint race pole setter JB. Then it is Koru, Bacon Bear, Robsu, Lawrence, and sorry, I only have access to the top 14 at the moment. Although, is it only 14 cars on the grid? Yeah, I believe so. So yeah, it's Lawrence in that 14th position at the very tail end of the field. 20 laps ahead of us, of course, for the feature race. And again, it could be a championship-defining race, but if Fortuna wins, he does need to outscore QVR Verstappen by 16 points. So not counting for fastest laps, QVR Verstappen would have to finish 12th for Fortuna to take home the championship, if my very quick maths is right, which, without another incident involving QVR Verstappen where he picks up damage, that does seem to be unlikely. Certainly wouldn't be like him, so it does seem at the moment as if we are trending towards the championship being decided potentially next week. But we're going to have to wait and see, of course, 20 more laps of action in front of us for the feature race. And the feature race at Interlagos is good with the High-Techs leading away, coming off of the lane. And it's a great start for Fortuna. He's well clear. And QVR Verstappen pinched on the inside there of Kylo Ren for those third and fourth places. He started on the soft tyres. He is going to be desperate to make early ground in this race. He just manages to fend off Reshka in that fourth and fifth place battle, but not the start that he was looking for, I think, to this race. He wants to make quick ground on those soft tyres, tucking into fourth place now and trying to get after Kylo Ren. There's battling, big, fierce battling further down the field, and cars going into contact there way off the road. It was Runes, gathers that Campos car back up, loses out to NMX James, who also has had a trying start to this race. He slots in just ahead of Koru, who's dived by Robsu, going into Essa, and slots into that 12th position. I'm looking around for damage though, because there was certainly at least carbon confetti flying at the early point in that first sector. But nevertheless, it is the High-Techs who've gotten away relatively cleanly. Doesn't seem to be damage for any one driver. Lawrence has come off the road further back, and there is damage, in fact, to that Trident car. So Lawrence with plenty to do early on in this race, and it's going to be very difficult for him to make up that ground. Fortuna does lead Jordan DHL and Kylo Ren. Next comes QVR Verstappen. QVR Verstappen in that fourth place doesn't seem to have an overwhelming grip advantage at the early stages, as Hugo with a big dive on Reshka for P5, fends him off on the exit, parks the car on the apex of that second corner, and he does manage to wrap up that fifth place. Reshka does have the slipstream behind, but of course with both cars having DRS, Hugo does have the speed to fend him off and try and go after the top four. He's made an impressive start to this race. Of course, a little bit frustrated to miss out on the on the sprint race win, but he does have the race leaders in front of him, and he is ready to go to work. But we saw how quick Jordan was in the last race. He runs a comfortable second at this stage, with Fortuna leading the way and in control at the moment. It doesn't seem as though the soft tyres have much of an advantage in these early laps. So QVR Verstappen, you'd imagine it may get difficult for him in the laps to come to hold on to that to hold on to the train, at least, of the three drivers in front of him. He will, of course, try and take advantage of the undercut when the time comes, but he's just circulating and trying to stay with the top three at the moment. Jordan DHL right with Fortuna now, and then the slipstream looking towards the inside, and it doesn't look as though his teammate is going to fight it very hard. Jordan to the race lead. Is he chasing a double win here tonight? He takes over the head of the race, and Fortuna, tucking into that second place, seemed very content to let that one go. So the High-Tech swap places up at the front. Kylo Ren chasing them in third position. Of course, any lapses from the top two he will look to try and take advantage of. QVR Verstappen comes next, and Hugo trying desperately to work his way closer and get himself into that battle up at the front. He has Reshka with him. Reshka then from Jackalacco. The field spreading early then as JB having to defend from NMX James. Again, it wasn't the best start from James early on, as I'm terrible at navigating these menus. There we go. James down 4 spots indeed at the start. Does have at least his full front wing at the moment, so he didn't seem to get in any major contact, but not the start he was looking for. That much is very much clear. And behind JB, he's struggling to stay in contact with the pack in front of him. These guys both, of course, starting on that medium tyre, which was the prevailing starting tyre choice. QVR Verstappen, you sense, of course, trying to preserve his championship challenge, was looking to try something different off the line, but at the moment the fruits of that labour not being discovered in fourth place at the moment, and with Hugo bearing down on him. Fortuna drawing near to Jordan DHL, but showing no interest in that race lead. Kylo Ren still with him, of course. These two High-Techs looking to control the race, just like we saw from the two Campos cars in the sprint race. Fortuna with the slipstream, he's certainly within range to go for the move on this occasion. Does he think about it? He immediately backs off that throttle pedal and just drops into that second place. Off the road behind is Robsu. Robsu recovering that Rodin, but you saw the front wing flying off, and round he goes again as he tries to gather the car back up. And Robsu well detached, unfortunately, from the rest of the F2 grid. So Robsu stranded in 14th place, but of course with only 14 cars on the grid, he will get points if he does see out the checkered flag with points going down to P15. Jordan in front, Fortuna chasing him hard in that second place. Next comes Kylo. QVR Verstappen seems to have rallied actually on this lap. He's sticking with these guys fairly strongly. So, of course, if he can keep them in shot at the very least, in view, he can take advantage of that undercut and get himself on a... Oh my goodness, it's rain! Oh my god, okay. We have seldom seen rain throughout this season. I think the only time we've actually seen rain was the rounds that I missed earlier on. But you definitely saw that flaring up. And now the question is, will it progress to full wets? No intermediate tyres, of course, in the F2 Cup. So that is going to make things very, very intriguing indeed. Another element thrown into the mix here. And you do think maybe QVR Verstappen thinking, is this rain going to come very early? Can I take advantage of grip off the line? It doesn't seem to have worked in his favour. But the question is, will this progress further? Robsu is into the pits. You imagine he was forced to with the wing damage. I can't imagine we're anywhere near the point where we're going to see wets put on and Robsu actually bringing his evening to a close. Slick tyres are going to get hard to handle. There is no question about that. You can see Jordan DHL, of course. These F2 cars are a bit more robust than the F1 cars in terms of dealing with the wet conditions on slick tyres. But nevertheless, it's going to be treacherous and tricky out there. And the driver's going to have to manage that. The rear end of Jordan DHL's car, you can see it kicking out. QVR Verstappen just falling away in this lap of the DRS, of the drivers in front of him. Doesn't have any intention to pull the pin early on. He does stay out yet another lap. Nowhere near that crossover point, you would think. Hugo to the inside. And I imagine it's going to be a straightforward move for the defending champion. And indeed, he does go through into 4th place. We'll try and bridge that DRS gap to the top 3 as they all try and adapt to these greasy conditions at Interlagos. Of course, it wouldn't be an Interlagos round without rain coming into it, and that is the evolution of this race that we are dealing with. So, who is going to thrive here with Kylo Ren trying to pressurize those high techs? If we do get a transition over to the wet tyres, the timing of that pit stop is going to be imperative. So let's keep a very, very close eye on that. Jordan is off the road. Jordan from the very head of the race, running wide from Ferradura and concedes P1 and P2. So already, the nature of these conditions throwing into it. The sprint race winner, the man who was leading the way in the feature race too, coming off the road. It's not a major error, but it has dropped him back. And I imagine that is not going to be the last off that we see from any of these drivers in conditions that on slick tyres are going to become increasingly hard to handle. Fortuna inherits the race lead, but he's being pressured hard by Kylo Ren for that race lead. So here we go now with DRS. Can Kylo Ren apply some pressure to the runaway championship leader? He's got a very good run with the slipstream. Fortuna to the middle of the road. Kylo Ren with late braking around the outside. They swap places for 3rd place behind 2. High tech's under pressure here. Fortuna managing to preserve the race lead, but Jordan, without such good fortunes, loses out to Hugo, who moves up into 3rd place and will try and get on after his long-time Tier 1 and elite teammate Kylo Ren in P2. Still very close though up at the front. Reshka in P6 still very much in the game as well. Again, it's a runaway group of 6 at the front of the race, just like we saw in the sprint. But we did see a brief break there with Jordan going off the road. The rain certainly not chucking it down in these early stages. We're not seeing a quick turnover like the game sometimes throws up, especially with the accelerated progression that you get from the 50 and 35% distance races. But yeah, certainly it's going to be a very, very big challenge for the drivers to put up with. Fortuna leading the way. And of course, the likes of QVR Verstappen will be getting towards that point where off the soft tyres, you would be looking to come in and get a set of the mediums on in a full dry race. So dilemmas you'd imagine kicking up here for QVR Verstappen. As you can see that rain piling up on his lens. He's enduring another lap. He thinks it's too early to at least put on the wets. Kylo Ren for the race lead. Looking for it against Fortuna. He gets that car stopped very effectively. And there's nothing Fortuna can do to counter. Maybe with DRS though. Can he try and reclaim the lead? Heading into to see the DUOLINGO. Now DRS engaged for the high-tech driver. The championship leader switching to the outside, looking for the race lead. They go side by side on the brakes. Fortuna trying to sweep past Kylo Ren on the exit. They are still right together as they run uphill towards Ferratura with nothing to choose between them. Fortuna has the benefit of that shorter run, tries to carry the speed in. Kylo Ren refusing to yield on the outside, but eventually the shorter run prevails and the championship leader is back to the head of the snake in this race. That snake extending down to the 4th place, Jordan DHL, right in it in just a mere couple of car lengths, separating those 4 drivers as they barrel in to Bico Tapato for the 8th time in this race. We're getting towards half distance. QVR Verstappen struggling heavily on the soft tires. You saw the rear end of the ART getting away, but again, he does not want to pit if he has any choice in the matter. Of course, maybe the rain is still relatively light, maybe it will never get to wet tires. What's the decision for QVR Verstappen? He is not pit lane bound. He is still trying to extend as long as he can. Kylo for the race lead, and this may be one he will stick. Reshka for 5th place on QVR Verstappen. Looks like that's a fairly academic move. QVR Verstappen with fading grip and without the battling potential to fend off these very high experienced drivers. Here comes Fortuna, looking again to reclaim the lead, looking towards the inside line. His DRS closing down the straight. It doesn't seem as though it's been disabled, which of course is always that tell for when it's time to get on to wet tyres and get off of those slicks. But at the moment the drivers are all trying to stick it out there and keep going for as long as they dare on slicks, but it's getting increasingly treacherous out there. You saw Fortuna's rear end stepping out of Ferradura. He managed to hold on to it, but through these tough tracking zones, I mean these, especially this one heading out of Bico Tapato, enviable in the dry, or unenviable in the dry I should say, but in these wet conditions I imagine a prohibited nightmare. And for Mugulio, a corner of course not much of a challenge in the dry, that becomes very, very sketchy when moisture is added to the equation. To the end of lap 9 we go, and still no movement it seems from the front runners. Does QVR Verstappen come in? We've been waiting for that decision. He is stretching these tyres to the absolute limit as Fortuna reclaims the lead going into the Senna S on this occasion. Watch for the exit heading out of the Senna S and into Curva de Sol. It doesn't look as though Kylo Ren is near enough. You can see him not turning in aggressively, making sure the rear end stays in check, heading through that flat out corner. Jordan DHL homing in on Hugo, fading to the inside and going very, very late. They makes big contact with the Campos car, and in the end not much coming of it. Hugo hanging around the outside, and you have to say that's fair enough. And Jordan DHL, a problem much of his own making, drops back into 4th position. I'm not sure if he intended to go for that move. It looked as though he just braked later and had to dart to the inside to not clobber the back of the reigning champion. He does nevertheless though manage to keep his hopes alive, and he still has a clear view of the 3 race leaders. Half distance at the end of this lap. Still torturous rain, torturous conditions for the drivers to navigate. Towards the end of lap 10 we go, and I think it is getting towards potentially that crossover point. But if you do put on the wet tyres, overheating could become a real concern for these guys. Now up at the lead of the race, and they still do not make that move. Kylo Ren with the slipstream, and he's going to breeze past Fortuna on the straight. And look at that, QVR Verstappen still in those soft tyres, as well as Bacon Bear, I should mention, further down the field, keeping those softs alive for as long as they can, because we cannot put on the wet tyres at this stage in the in this feature race. Kylo Ren hanging on to the lead. Jordan, with that mistake on the last lap, has dropped outside of that 1 second. DRS is still enabled at this stage, which of course is going to make drivers very hesitant to come in. Lawrence has elected to do so though. Further down the field in that Trident car, Bacon Bear has followed suit. Torture, I imagine it must be, on those soft tyres. And I imagine, well, what's the tyre choice going to be? That is the big question. Lawrence has come in earlier than you would expect off those tyres, and you can see the grooves. It is the wet tyres going on for Lawrence. So now we're going to finally get a barometer as to how these tyres perform. For Bacon Bear though, it's a set of the mediums. Very, very interesting indeed, that contrast. But with the as we've lost Runes from the session, unfortunately, and again his connection failing him. Hopefully he can work his way back in short order. I don't know if I have him added, so I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that myself, I'm afraid, as JB's come off the road at Biko Tapato. It's getting very, very treacherous out there, as out of the pits come Bacon Bear and Lawrence, and we're going to get a very good comparison, of course, without the tyre blankets in F2. Slick tyres on a greasy track are going to be hellish. Surely, you have to say for Bacon Bear, though, it didn't look half bad through there, and actually gaining on Lawrence through that part of the track. And so sure enough, for the race leaders at the very least, they do all stay out. Kylo Ren now with the race lead ahead of Fortuna. They have been going back and forth with near relentlessness amongst the race leaders. But when do they come in? And if so, is it going to be for the slicks? I imagine this decision is playing heavily on their minds as Hugo just patiently trying to build an offensive in that third place and Jordan chasing them. These four have separated themselves from the rest of this F2 field. But look at the snaking of the rear end of all of these cars. It is horrible stuff out there. Off the road is Bacon Bear. She has managed to gap Lawrence for the most part on this lap, so the pace seems to be still there for the slicks, but it's that sketchiness, that risk of an error that's going to make that decision a much harder dilemma. From the front, Kylo Ren, does he pit? No, he doesn't. He stays out yet longer, and the medium runners, for the most part, will try and extend it, but Hugo is going to go against the grain. Hugo is in, as is QVR Verstappen, in a decision, dare I say, that was forced. He is into the pit lane too. What is the tyre choice going to be? Hugo has more of an option, and it is Slicks, still enabled in that pit lane as Koru overshoots his marks, heading in, unfortunately for him. So Hugo does re-emerge. QVR Verstappen more incentivized to go for the wet tyres, but he does not do so. Still enduring on those slicks, it's just not heavy enough, it seems, for these drivers to pull that pin and make that decision to put a set of those groove tyres on. Runes, well, not much of a choice for him in that matter. Lawrence, of course, the only driver still on the wets of his own volition, but really struggling for pace out there, and certainly not an advertisement to put the wets on at this stage in the race. And even the likes of QVR Verstappen, who had fought on those soft tyres, hoping against hope that we would transition to wet tyres, having to eventually concede and put a set of medium tyres on. But look at Kylo Ren's rear end heading into Jun Shao. It is horrible out there to manage on slicks, and that decision is going to get tough. I still believe in these last few laps it's going to be hard to manage. Hugo, of course, trying to make that undercut work, breezing past JB further down the field. Kylo Ren is in. Fortuna has stayed out. Still contrasting strategies amongst the race leaders. This is a fascinating affair in this feature race. But what does Kylo Ren do? Will he go with the seeming majority decision to put a set of slick tyres on? Those are softs in the pit lane, and it is indeed the slicks for Kylo Ren. And again, it just doesn't seem as though the wets are the tyre to be on in spite of the constant rain. And this is where the F2 cars miss a... they do miss a intermediate tyre, which would of course be the perfect tyre to be on with these conditions. Hugo, though, with Kylo Ren, that one lap undercut paying off for the Swede. He has got the jump on Kylo Ren, and you suspect that Fortuna is going to be in trouble from these guys, considering the fact, of course, Hugo had to work his way past JB on that last lap, so undercut very, very valuable. All tyres in these conditions are going to be a nightmare. Hi to Canalflow in the chat. This, yeah, Runes and Hugo. You have to say it was a very well managed race for the most part, but that one little error at the end where Runes just dropping outside of that DRS, massively costly, unfortunately, for what was up to that point a sterling drive from those guys. Fortuna staying out another lap. Does he want to go to intermediates? These high-techs, they seem to have that philosophy. It will, or I say intermediates, wet, sorry. It will go to wets. That is what they believe will eventually be the case. I can't find any other justification for staying out this long, as it's going to be 15 of the 20 laps on the one set of tyres. So they're going to try and stretch it to the wets, but is it going to be a worthwhile decision? The rain is not intensifying, of course. The track, I imagine, will be getting increasingly harder to drive on the slicks. But again, I'm watching Lawrence continue to fall away from Bacon Bear further down the field, and that says to me it is not time to put the wet tyres on. It's not the strategy to call to make, but these high-techs have sort of backed themselves into a corner here. Actually, is Lawrence... I'm not sure if Lawrence is still in the game, although he was just ghosted now. It doesn't seem as though he is still in there. It's Hugo with a penalty. Of course, he was looking for a race win, but Hugo's penalty, that is going to be very, very dearly costly for him. And Kylo Ren may be in the driving seat now for this feature race win, and what would be a tremendous haul of points for him. What do the high-techs do? One of them surely has the pit at the end of this lap. The other driver is going to be in a terrible race situation, surely. But Fortuna still staying out. Jordan DHL is in at the end of lap 15, so the championship leader is going to do at least 80% of this race on the starting set of tyres. He's certainly far from alone in that regard, as Reshka, James and Jackalacco all electing to endure, and I imagine look for any which way of putting on the wets at the end of this race. But Jordan DHL is not doing that. It's slick tyres on. He re-emerges, but surely conceding a tremendous undercut to Hugo and Kylo. Kylo now with the slipstream in the DRS to the inside for 5th position on the road, but what could be a race win. He is through and goes up into 5th place. He has a tyre advantage. Hugo has a penalty, and Kylo Ren, I think I've seen him pick up maybe 2 penalties in his entire APPF1 career, or something of that matter. He's in a tremendous position in this race, and you have to say, unless the rain gets substantially worse, it's hard to see a way where he is bested by the other drivers up at the front. Fortuna, what is he going to do? Reshka, James, Jackalacco, they have fought on, and you have to say it's admirable. It has to be horrendous experience driving in these sort of interslip conditions with 15 lap medium tyres on, but they are going to be screaming at them and maybe even going towards puncture territory, and Fortuna eventually concedes. Is he going to put on the slicks again? The wet tyres still not a tyre that works. Fortuna having a bit of trouble getting that car stopped to the 60 km/h speed limit, but manages to do so. Reshka and James stay out. Jackalacco is in. Fortuna, what's the call going to be? It slicks once again. Of course, the wet tyre is just not the tyre to be on. But how much has he conceded to Kylo and Hugo? Well, Jordan is 5 seconds behind them. Of course, Fortuna was ahead on the road of his teammate, but that just speaks to how much they have conceded with that undercut. Of course, they well have the tyre advantage, actually. Fortuna, oh my goodness me, nearly dropping it on the pit lane with those cold tyres, but he isn't as far away as I might have suspected, and he does have the tyre advantage. JB overshooting his marks into the pit lane here at Brazil, and given the state of the tyres that they're on, you have to say that's not entirely surprising. He's another driver who stayed out as long as he possibly dared on those medium tyres. Still, Reshka and James sticking with it up at the front. 17 laps it's going to be. The rain, if anything, may be a little bit heavier, but I'm not quite sure. Koru and QVR are stepping side by side for 7th position on the road, and Koru is going to get the best of it, but QVR Verstappen does have the advantage at the very least of not having a time penalty, but Jackalacco behind the pair of them has a major advantage in those tyres, so he'll be fancying his chances at grabbing those positions and potentially threatening Reshka and James, who, well, Reshka is going to stay out once again. James is in. The rain definitely looks heavier. Can James? No, he, to be honest, was not really all that close to getting the car stopped. It does seem as though maybe, just maybe, think the tide is finally turning towards the wets. Does James opt to put the wets on? The answer to that is still no. Well, they have tried and tried as they might to stay out as long as they possibly can and see if that crossover is ever going to happen, but it just hasn't quite occurred. And so the drivers who really ran the most traditional strategy and ignored the conditions to the nth degree seems to have been the drivers who have benefited the most, and it seems as though no one has benefited more than Kylo Ren, who is running away with things up at the front. Reshka will have to concede in box. I don't know if even legally he can stay out another lap after this. Look at the way his rear end is snaking around, heading through this middle sector, nearly dropping it, heading out of Bico de Pato. It's horrible, horrible stuff out there. The drivers have done a tremendous job of enduring these conditions. But Reshka surely is going to come in at the end of this lap, and I imagine that he is conceding an awful lot of time to the drivers that he was fighting. Reshka, no he does not. Reshka stays out once again. Well, what an enduring drive it's been from Reshka. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to be a strategy that's going to bear much fruit. Fortuna is charging late, getting through to Hugo. But even with the tyre advantage, surely Kylo Ren is a stretch too far. Fortuna goes through into third position on the road, will become second, but Kylo Ren has 3 seconds in hand. He is closing. Dare I say, though, not closing quickly enough. Kylo Ren just has to tiptoe around these last 2 laps. Certainly no mean feat with how horrible the track is at this stage, but he just has to bring this one home. Second place will surely become first place at the end of this lap. Reshka, well, to even keep these tyres alive for 19 laps is an absolutely sterling effort, but I mean, I don't think there's much that I have to say at this stage, as the Van Amersfoort driver can barely keep that car in a straight line through every facet of this track, and he's losing seconds a lap to the drivers pursuing him. Just 8 seconds clear now of Kylo Ren. Fortuna is taking time out of Kylo Ren, but with 2.5 seconds in hand, surely the Rodin has this race to win and has the race victory in front of him. Reshka, well, we'll see what the tyre choice is going to be for the last lap, and he does indeed come. He brakes exceedingly early for the pit stop, and you can't blame him. Trying to push the boat out in any regard would surely lead to a speeding penalty, as we've seen several drivers pick up. 3, in fact, James, Koru and Verstappen, and JB, sorry, all with such penalties. Kylo Ren into the final lap. You have to say Fortuna maybe with one more lap would be able to chase him down, but it does seem as though it's just not going to be the case. Wet tyres for Reshka for 1 lap only. He will, of course, drop a long way down the field, but what I have to say, what a drive. There it is, DRS disabled. Like a cruel joke that fate has played on the drivers. Reshka is going to come out very, very close to the likes of QVR Verstappen, and we'll see how competitive those wets are, I suppose, in this last lap scrap, and as he is going to be almost side by side with Verstappen. The ART driver does get the upper hand. How much grip does Reshka have on those wets? He does seem to have enough to fight at the very least, so he will go hunting for that 8th place, and potentially gaining with penalties for James and Koru too, further up the road. So maybe still a good haul of points for Reshka in spite of the strategy. But up at the front, Kylo Ren, well, straight back to action here in the F2 Cup here tonight, and it has been a peerless display for the multiple Tier 1 champion. He has seen off the man who is surely going to wrap up the championship. Not tonight, I don't think it's going to be for Fortuna, but he has taken a major step ever closer. Not to be on this occasion though. Kylo Ren to the line, takes home the feature race win, chased home by Fortuna as Jordan DHL takes home the final place on the podium. Next up comes Hume Hug in virtually no man's land, in a fierce fight further behind. Reshka making big ground. He's chasing home Jackalacko for potentially a top 5 finish. Up to the line they come. He does get the best of Koru in that drag race, but Jackalacko will hold on and gets a very credible 5th. Reshka 6th and QVR Verstappen in P7. And I do believe, despite being outscored heavily by Fortuna tonight, he will keep the championship fight alive going into the final 2 rounds of the season. James in P8, Koru 9th, JB will come home in 10th position. Does have a penalty disadvantage against Bacon Bear, but will get 10th nonetheless. Bacon Bear will come next, just ahead of the AI car of Runes. Lawrence already over the line in P13. Robsu not seeing out the checkered flag tonight. So that brings to the end another memorable night of racing. Let's just see. I'll quickly see, of course, what the fastest lap point is going to go, and then we can calculate the final the final gap in the championship between the top 2 ahead of the final 2 rounds of the season. But my gut feeling is that QVR Verstappen has just about kept the title fight alive, going down towards the final round. First things first, we will clear up the results from this feature race. Kylo Ren taking home the race win ahead of Fortuna. Jordan DHL taking home third place. It's a Swedish 2-3-4 with Johan Hug taking fourth place. Jack Olako in fifth, then Reshka entertained us all throughout the night. Does actually somehow match his grid position. QVR Verstappen is P7, not a night for him, unfortunately. NMX James next in P8, then Koru and JB rounding out the top 10. Bacon, Barrett, Runes, Lawrence all getting points for their troubles tonight. Then Robsu, the last driver classified. So just to clear up, I did establish that the championship gap was 50 points after the sprint race, and with Fortuna taking home second place, fastest lap goes to Jordan DHL, so that's no concern to the championship leaders. But Jordan DHL takes Fortuna, takes 16 points away from tonight from this feature race. QVR Verstappen with P7 takes away. Let me just. It's the normal point system. I really should know this. 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 9 points. So it's a 7-point swing. By my very crude calculations, 57 points in the championship. Not quite enough for Fortuna to wrap up the championship, but certainly giving himself a leg up and looks almost set to take that title home in the next round. But that will bring home the action for this evening. Also worth noting, in the Constructors' Championship, while I don't have exact calculations, High Tech will have doubtlessly extended their lead on ART and look again set to progress with that championship win. They are certainly headed towards that goal. But guess one more thing to cover is driver of the day, and well, the certainly drive of the day has to go to Jordan DHL with that incredible run through the field in the sprint race. Although Kylo Ren equally imperious throughout tonight, I believe may just well end this evening as the leading point scorer too, with a third and a first finish, but the first coming in the feature race. So given the fact that he's making a return to F2 action, it's a very, very tough call, but I think just coming home with the win after what was an incredibly tough night of action, but in particular that feature race was such a feat of endurance, and Kylo Ren was expert in the way he managed to see that one through. So I do think I would give him the driver of the day nod, but very, very close between those two. But I think that is going to be just about it. Again, we are going to expect to see the championship wrapped up in the next round of the season in Abu Dhabi, but you're going to have to be seated for that one. Of course, we will have action from Abu Dhabi throughout the APPF1 week, with Tier 3 kicking off the action tomorrow night. Next up, after that is Tier 2, and after that the Tier 1 race on Friday. And then you will be back with me for the F2 Cup at Abu Dhabi. Be sure not to miss it. But I think that's just about going to wrap things up for this evening. So from myself, Daka, it is goodbye for now, and until next time, we'll see you later.